This session on enabling environments for community resilience is part of the training course on localizing disaster risk reduction for anticipatory action. Specifically, it will focus on sustainable livelihoods and business continuity planning. This session is informed by ADPC's experience on implementing community resilience programs, as well as projects for engaging the private sector and businesses on disaster management in the Asia region. Let's start with an overview of this session. Participants will be introduced on how sustainable livelihoods can be achieved through approaches including business continuity planning, and how this relates to realizing holistic community resilience to disasters. The objectives of the session are as follows. Discuss sustainable livelihood approaches in the context of community disaster risk reduction. Examine the importance of livelihood approaches to disaster risk reduction and how enterprises can prepare for disruptive events through business continuity planning. Explain the concept of business continuity planning and business continuity plans. As you will have been finding out through the modules you have covered so far, building community resilience should be a holistic approach for disaster management in the community, and should include the engagement of various stakeholders, including businesses or enterprises at different scales. As you will see in this slide, there are a range of stakeholders who can be engaged as part of community resilience strengthening. Of course, community members are at the heart of this, but other stakeholders such as businesses, government agencies, and NGOs should all be considered as part of overall community engagement. Therefore, in this session, we will see how community resilience is at the intersection between some of the critical, theoretical, and practical concepts of disaster management, including sustainable livelihoods. The concept of sustainable livelihoods was popularized in the 1980s by the Brundtland Commission on Environment and Development as a way of linking socio-economic and ecological considerations in the field of rural development. Building on this work, the Institute for Development Studies, IDS, at the University of Sussex, together with the UK's former Department for International Development, DFID, formulated the Sustainable Livelihoods Development Guidance Sheets in 1999, including a livelihoods framework. A useful definition of sustainable livelihoods is as follows. A livelihood comprises the capabilities, assets, including both material and social resources, and activities required for a means of living. A livelihood is sustainable when it can cope with and recover from stresses and shocks, and maintain or enhance its capabilities and assets, both new and in the future, while not undermining the natural resource base. We can see there are already some clear linkages between the concepts of livelihoods and disaster management. Let's bear in mind this definition as we continue the session. The diagram shown on screen is from DFID's Sustainable Livelihoods Framework. The framework is built around 5 principal categories of interconnected livelihood assets. These are physical, human, financial, natural, and social. This framework demonstrates that livelihoods depend on a combination of assets, as well as a population's ability to put these to productive use. The Sustainable Livelihoods Framework provides a broad and systematic view of the factors that cause poverty, whether these are shocks and adverse trends, a basic lack of assets, or poorly functioning institutions and policies. It also considers the relationships between these factors. As such, the framework offers a way of assessing how organizations, policies, institutions, and cultural norms shape livelihoods, both by determining who gains access to which type of asset and defining what range of livelihood strategies are available and attractive to populations. Now, we can think about how we link this theoretical concept of sustainable livelihoods to our unit of focus, which is the community. We know that livelihoods exist at different scales. One tangible example would be business enterprises. In this session, we will consider enterprises of different scales, including micro, medium, and small enterprises, MSMEs, as well as larger companies. As shown in the graphic on screen, number of employees is just one way in which we can categorize businesses of different sizes. Businesses, both large and small, are physically embedded in or located next to urban and rural communities. This means that their direct exposure to natural and other large-scale hazards is generally the same as that of the communities where they operate or are surrounded by. The implication for businesses are particularly serious. Assets, operations, supply chains, and markets will be impacted. Business continuity, competitiveness, and corporate reputation can be placed at risk. Therefore, businesses need to consider the ways in which they can strengthen their capacity and ability, or resilience, to withstand the stresses and shocks posed by such disaster events. One such approach is the implementation of business continuity and the development of business continuity plans. What is a business continuity plan, or BCP? Business continuity may be defined as the capability of an organization or an enterprise or a livelihood to continue the delivery of products or services at predefined acceptable levels following a disruptive incident. A business continuity plan, on the other hand, is the documented procedure that guides organizations to respond, recover, resume, and restore to a predefined level of operation following disruption. Therefore, a BCP is the tangible output of the implementation of business continuity processes. They can be used by business enterprises as well as other types of organizations. It is also important to consider how we define business in this context. Business continuity addresses the plans and procedures for an organization to be able to operate during a disaster disruption. However, this is not limited to commercial enterprises, as business continuity principles can be adapted by organizations such as those from the public sector or schools, which also function within a community. What does a business continuity plan involve? BCP involves identifying and assessing risks that can affect an enterprise's operations. This makes it an important part of the organization's risk management strategy. Once the risks are identified, the plan should also include determining how these risks will affect operations, implementing safeguards and procedures to mitigate the risks, testing procedures to ensure they work, reviewing the process to make sure that it is up to date. So, let us ask ourselves, why implement business continuity planning? Businesses are prone to a host of disasters that vary in degree from minor to catastrophic. A BCP is meant to help a company continue operating in the event of threats and disruptions, which could result in a loss of revenue and higher costs, leading to a drop in profitability. The chart shown on screen compares a business with a BCP versus a business without a BCP. If there is no BCP in place, an enterprise will likely have trouble in recovering and might need to downscale its operations, as demonstrated by the purple dotted line. In the worst-case scenario, a business may go bankrupt with liabilities for unmet obligations, ultimately resulting in forced closure, as shown by the red line. However, if an enterprise has a BCP, the enterprise can maintain an acceptable level of operation following a disaster event. These enterprises can resume their business activities faster than those organizations who do not maintain a BCP. What are the possible competitive advantages of a BCP? A BCP can help a company and its stakeholders, employees, customers, or visitors, stay safe when a disruptive event happens. It can provide a roadmap for a company to prepare for and plan to continually operate under adverse conditions. It can help speed up the recovery of critical business functions. It shows that the company has thought ahead and put systems in place to shield itself from risks for it to continue doing business and deliver to its customers, even when things get tough. Taking care of employees and their families can also contribute to community resilience. Steps for implementing BCP. There are numerous methodologies which can be utilized when developing a business continuity plan. ADPC has synthesized the BCP process into 4 key steps. Step 1 is determining the BCP framework, including the objectives, scope, and team. Step 2 is undertaking business analysis, including risk assessment and impact assessment. Step 3 is to identify business continuity strategies or measures. Step 4 includes exercise and review. This is for the periodical testing and improvement of the plan. Benefits of testing and exercising BCP. The benefits of testing and exercising BCP may include clarifying roles and responsibilities of BCP team and staff, evaluating current arrangements for business continuity, for example, procedures, strategies, and employees' knowledge and skills, identifying weaknesses and missing information in the BCP, for example, resource communication and coordination gaps, raising employee awareness and confidence in the BCP by reinforcing knowledge of procedures, improving organizational coordination and communication. Overall, business continuity plans, or BCPs, serve as documented procedures to guide the prevention and recovery of disruptive events such as disasters. BCP is designed to guide organizations to protect their personnel and assets and make sure they can function or resume when disaster strikes. BCPs should be tested and updated regularly to identify and correct any weaknesses. You can find out more about business continuity planning by accessing ADPC's online course. The link is provided in the description of this video. Next, I would like to introduce a case study on linkages between community disaster risk reduction and business continuity. This case study focuses on a project for connecting community preparedness and business resilience for environmental sustainability, which was implemented in Thailand by ADPC. It demonstrates recognition by a business of the importance of connecting its business activities with wider community resilience. To access the case study, you can click the link provided in the description of this video. Having watched the video, you can consider the following questions. What are some of the shared priorities which communities and businesses may have when it comes to disaster management? Are there any differences in terms of the priorities which communities and businesses will place on preparing or recovering from disasters? Businesses are an important part of the communities and societies within which they exist. They are therefore an important stakeholder for disaster management. However, there may be differences in terms of the priorities which communities and businesses will place on preparing for or recovering from disasters. Businesses are primarily profit-driven. So, while there may be shared benefits for supporting community preparedness, enterprises may ultimately be focused on maintaining and recovering their operations to acceptable levels in the face of disruptive events. Nonetheless, there are other examples of businesses who have taken steps to contribute to community resilience. For instance, enterprises who have established a database of employee information and records are able to determine who is affected, who needs to be rescued, and who needs to be evacuated in disaster situations among their workforce. Large shopping malls in the Philippines and some industrial estates in Thailand have designed their buildings and infrastructure to serve as shelter for disaster evacuees in the area. In Japan, there are cases of companies storing food and necessary items in case of an earthquake, meaning employees can make use of the stored food and shelter in the workplace if they are unable to travel home. As we are reaching the end of this session, here are some key points to bear in mind. A holistic approach for disaster management in the community should include the engagement of various stakeholders, including businesses or enterprises at different scales. The inclusion of the private sector is an important consideration for disaster risk management, as noted in guidance such as the Sendai Framework. By enhancing the ability of enterprises to cope with disruptive events, it can safeguard the livelihoods of community members, thereby enhancing overall community resilience. Thank you very much for your attention, and best of luck with the rest of the course.